Hi, this is Ed Driscoll. Welcome to Silicon Graffiti. As the author of Jurassic Park, Michael Crichton knows a thing or two about dinosaurs and extinction. 15 years ago, in an early issue of Wired magazine, Crichton wrote that, to my mind, it is likely that what we now understand as the mass media will be gone within 10 years, vanished without a trace. As Jack Shafer wrote in Slate recently, Crichton may have been off by about 5 years, but the handwriting's clearly on the wall for old media.
Shafer wrote, "As we pass his prediction's 15-year anniversary, I've got to declare advantage Crichton. Rot afflicts the newspaper industry, which is shedding staff, circulation, and revenues. It's gotten so bad in Newspaperville that some people want Google to buy the Times and run it as a charity. Evening news viewership continues to evaporate, and while the mass media aren't going extinct tomorrow, Crichton's original observations about the media future now ring more true than false. Ask any journalist."
So how did the legacy media, as we only half-jokingly like to call the predecessors to the blogosphere, begin to fall apart? First, it helps to understand that the idea of the mass media is a surprisingly new one in the scope of things, having been created in the 1920s by the first national radio networks. And media actually began to start becoming increasingly demassified less than 60 years later. Demassified is a favorite term of sociologists and futurists Alvin and Heidi Toffler from the Third Wave, their 1980 bestseller, the sequel to Future Shock, published a decade earlier. What is the third wave, and what were the first and second waves? Well, let's let the Tofflers explain it.
Quickly define the first, second, and third wave so people that haven't paid close attention to this will understand.
The first wave was the agricultural revolution, which started when somebody planted a seed and found out that they could grow food and stay in one place.
Thousands of years.
Yes, and that spread at the rate of 1 kilometer a year for 9,000 years. It spread very slowly. Then about 350 years ago, the Industrial Revolution began, bringing about the second, we say the second great historic wave of change. And then in about 1955, roughly, the third wave of change began, which is, if you want to put a single word on it, like industrial or agricultural, probably information is the best, the information revolution.
For example, between 1956 and 1960, those 5 years, and precisely the time when we were here, you had the following. For the first time in the United States, service workers outnumbered blue-collar workers. Service and information workers outnumbered. It was the beginning of this great transition. Second, during that same period, you had the introduction of the universalization of television. You had the introduction of jet commercial travel. You had the introduction of the birth control pill. You had powerful economic, technological, and the computer was just beginning to bubble through. And all of this was happening, and on the Hill and in Washington, it is as though none of that had happened.
As Glenn Reynolds described in An Army of Davids, the industrialization of the second wave created a somewhat aberrant period in history where big, very big, was good. Television and radio networks needed to be big in order to be profitable, and uniformity of product increased profits by minimizing the need to retool, whether it was a year's worth of cars on the assembly line or a day's worth of newspapers on the printing press. And while the first commercial computers began to arrive in the 1950s, even they were big pieces of iron such as the ones behind me. But in the mid-1970s, the first personal computers debuted, selling at prices increasingly affordable to consumers. The personal computer, even with its desktop size, packs much more power than those old big iron mainframes we saw just a few minutes ago, and it would eventually be the equalizer for the individual and mass media. It's no coincidence that as technology has lowered entry prices, the information choices available to consumers has skyrocketed.
Paralleling the first radio networks, from the 1940s through the 1970s, there were 3 main commercial broadcast television networks. By 1980, there were 28 cable television networks. A decade later, there were 79. By the late 1990s, satellite and cable TV services offered hundreds of channels. But that pales in comparison to the World Wide Web and our little corner of it, the blogosphere. As I wrote in Tech Central Station in March of 2004, there were approximately 7 million weblogs back then. That's a huge number by most stretches of the imagination, but Technorati.com, the search engine designed to track weblogs, recorded 50 million blogs in July of 2006. A year later, it was 70 million. Technorati currently tracks over 112 million weblogs, most of which are one-man operations. Yes, the vast majority aren't worth your time, but consider the alternative.
There's an old joke. Two elderly women are at a Catskill Mountain resort, and one of them says, "Boy, the food at this place is really terrible." The other one says, "Yeah, I know, and such small portions."
By the start of the new millennium, any web surfer with a broadband internet account has access to much more personalized news, opinion, and entertainment than ever before. And at the very moment when technology was making it easy for a one-man band or blog or show to reach a large audience cheaply, big media was blowing it. As Michael Crichton wrote 15 years ago, the American media produce a product of very poor quality. Its information is not reliable, it has too much chrome and glitz, its doors rattle, it breaks down almost immediately, and it's sold without warranty. It's flashy, but it's basically junk. Today, traditional newspapers are rapidly losing money. One reason why is that instead of a bland, one-size-fits-all institutional style, bloggers provide guides with all sorts of mindsets and worldviews that help millions of readers make sense of the news. Similarly, websites such as Craigslist have stolen newspapers' classified ad revenue, which papers heavily relied upon in the past to keep the lights on and journalists paid. Sam Zell, the owner of the Tribune Company, which publishes the Chicago Tribune, the Los Angeles Times, Newsday, the Baltimore Sun, and other Jurassic-era publications, recently told his reporters,
"Three guys in a garage create YouTube, and we had 800 people in Chicago who don't know their ass from a hole in the ground."
If you listen carefully to Zell, you can hear Toffler's second and third waves colliding just off stage. The original dinosaurs, like the media dinosaurs that Michael Crichton wrote about 15 years ago, couldn't understand why their demise was occurring. But as the third wave pounds the second wave into history, and concurrently forces its industries to adapt or die, now you do. Happily surfing away on the bleeding edge of the third wave, for Silicon Graffiti, I'm Ed Driscoll.